Okay, welcome to Year 9 Science Online with Any van Vieren.
Hey guys, welcome back to the second term. Yeah, I'm sure you guys we hopefully just had a good teleconference together just to welcome everybody back, and I hope everybody is doing well. So here goes today's lesson. We're continuing on the path of botany, just going through what's happening and so forth. Alrighty, so here we go. Just to remind you guys, we talked about what is a living thing and what is a non-living thing, and we based that on Mrs. C. Gren or Mrs. Gren, and movement, respiration, sensing, growth, reproduction, excretion, nutrition, and the C is for cells. Okay, and we talked about the five kingdoms of animals, fungi, bacteria, protista or protists, and plants. And we looked at how they all differ from each other and different examples of them, and hopefully some interesting examples of animals. Also showed you some fake animals and the blobfish, all the vertebrates and the invertebrates, and then we looked at bacteria or the prokaryotes, and then we looked at the difference between a plant cell and an animal cell, okay, and how these differ from each other. So the major three differences is that they all have a cell membrane, cytoplasm, a nucleus where they store the DNA, ribosomes where they make their protein, and mitochondria to make energy for the cell. But a plant has a cell wall because it does not have an exo or an endoskeleton. Every single one of its cells is part of its skeleton, the cell wall, and a cell membrane. And they have a giant vacuole, which is kind of like the inner tube of your bicycle. So if you pump that up, it pumps up the whole cell, and that keeps the cell wall nice and up, and that keeps the whole plant up. And that's why when you see a plant drooping, you can just give it some water and it will actually stand right back up because this vacuole gets pumped full of water. And lastly, it's got a chloroplast. The chloroplast is what makes them green and helps them to photosynthesize. Okay, so, and we said that's the reason why plants are green, because of photosynthesis and the chloroplast. And we looked at these, and you're supposed to know which ones are not in a plant, actually not in an animal, and only found in plant cells. Okay, it's really important. I asked you to look at some videos regarding, um, I think that was the crocodiles and so forth. Also, we talked about photosynthesis, and photosynthesis is where a plant takes water and carbon dioxide and turns that into sugar and oxygen, which is amazing. Okay, and you are supposed to be able to write down that word equation for us, where water and carbon dioxide turns into sugar and oxygen. Now, to get the water all the way from the ground into the leaves so that it can participate in photosynthesis, it has to go through a process called transpiration. Okay, so how does the water actually get from the roots all the way up to the leaves? It runs through, you can always call them arteries and veins, but it's called xylem, which are the vessels that takes them up. Now, xylem, and also the other one is called phloem. Phloem, it has an F sound to it, pH. Phloem is for food. That brings the glucose that's made in the leaves during photosynthesis all the way down to where the root cells need it, and the xylem takes the water up. So, but land plants, they need to make sure that they don't dry out, so they have these little mouths called stomata, and that allows the gas to go in and out, but also water to escape. And the oxygen that is produced by the tree, they need to get rid of that too, so that goes out through the stomata. Okay, so these are a microscope photo of um, a two stomata, and you can see that we have the two guard cells, like in guards, an armed guard, but this is not an armed guard. This is a guard that's guarding the opening that is called the stomata, and they can contract and close so that no water can get lost. So imagine if it's a very, very hot day and it's the hottest part of the day, you don't want to lose a lot of water because of evaporation. So what do? You close your stomata. But now you've built up a lot of oxygen and you need some CO2 so that you can go through photosynthesis. Then you open it again. Okay. This is, and we looked at extreme close-up. So we've done that already, but here you can see some chloroplasts and the beautiful structure of the cell wall there. Now, parts and function of a flower. That is new work for you. So, oh no. So when you look at a plant, the plant has a life cycle, just like you and I. Okay? You and I, you were basically conceived and then you grow in your mommy's tummy until it was time for you to get born, and then you're growing. You're now getting to an age where you're turning into a teenager or an adolescent, and then from there you'll become a mature adult. Um, you will be a young adult first, mature adult, and then a middle-aged person. After that, you will become an old person. Okay, so over here, when you look at a plant, let's start here at pollinization. This is where the pollen, and you all have heard of pollen because a lot of people are allergic to pollen. That's where the pollen, which is the male parts of a plant, so it's almost like sperm, it actually contains sperm, falls on the stigma, the sticky stigma, okay, and that's the female part. So when they fall on there, that's called pollination. And then what happens is that pollen actually grows a tube down all the way into the ovary. And in the ovary is where they find the egg cells. And these egg cells are called ovules. So then the sperm can swim down, get to the egg, and fertilize the egg. That fertilized part then turns into a seed. Okay? And that seed is then dispersed, and it can be dispersed by animals or various different ways, and we'll look at that. Then when it lands where it's going to be in a happy place, it germinates, and germination is where it grows a little root first, and then out comes um, the plumule, which is going to be the future plant. So it grows and that comes out of the ground, and then the plant grows from a small plant into a very large plant, or into the size that it's supposed to be. If it's a flowering plant, then it makes flowers again, and then it goes. The flower is purely there for pollination, okay, to make sure that the sperm can get to the egg. That is the reason why there's a flower, all about getting the sperm to the egg. Okay, so it's planted, it germinates, it grows, and it forms flowers. Those turn into seeds, and it goes back in. So the flower is essential for most plants, that is, to carry out reproduction. The flower's parts are efficient in allowing pollination to occur. So why do you think a plant spends so much energy on making this pretty flower? Is it just to impress us? No, it's actually to attract the pollinators. And we'll look at a few different pollinators, but pollinators can be animals, big animals. It can be a small bird like a hummingbird. It can be a bee, and we know we love the world's bees because they pollinate a lot of our stuff for us, especially our food production. It can be butterflies, it can be moths, it can be uh, what do you call them? Well, it can be flies. And what are those big green flies called again? Can't think of the name now. It can even be ants, it can be tuies, it can be little lizards, it can be big lizards, lots of different things. Now, here are the largest flowers in the world. Okay, this one over here. Oh, let's start with this one. This one is called the corpse flower, like a dead body corpse. Okay, so this is called the corpse flower. I believe it is from Indonesia or Malaysia. It is one of the biggest true flowers out there, and you can see the size. It's much bigger than a person's torso. But the interesting thing about it, it smells like rotting flesh. Okay, it smells like a decaying body. That's why it's called the corpse flower. Why do you think it smells so bad? It's to attract a pollinator. Now, what do you think goes off the stinky stuff? Yeah, flies. So this thing is pollinated by flies. This is another stinky one. It's called the carrion flower. and it only blooms like once in every 15 years. And I hope you guys were lucky enough to also go to the Auckland Winter Gardens a few years ago when this thing was in bloom. You could see this flower like once every 15 years, and then it comes out. Man, it stinks to high heaven. It smells like rotting flesh. Over here we have a very big desert flower from Namibia. It's called the Welwitschia. It's a huge flower, but the difference is there's a male flower and there's a female flower. And this one over here is the male flower, and it's got its pollen over there, and this one over there is the female flower, and they only have the stigmas. And they also smell terrible, and the reason why they smell terrible is how many bees do you think you find in a desert? Not a lot. But wherever there's things that die, there will be flies. So consequently, that's why the Welwitschia also uses flies. Here's our friend the bee, and I just think these are amazing photos where you can see the individual pollen grains on this bee, and it's using its proboscis to drink the nectar. So not only do flowers have beautiful colors and beautiful petals, they also give off a scent to attract, all of this is to attract the pollinators, but some of them even reward the pollinators by giving them nectar. So the main reason why the bee will go to the flower is to collect nectar. They also collect pollen because they do eat pollen, but that's not their main thing. The main thing is to collect the nectar, and they turn that nectar for us into lovely, lovely honey. Okay, and here are the parts of a flower, and you are expected to be able to recognize them and draw and basically fill in this picture. So when we look, let's look at the female part first. Okay, that's that middle green one that kind of looks like a flask. Okay, so the very top is sticky. Okay, and that is called the sticky stigma, and that is where the pollen needs to fall, and that's why it's sticky. So that if this little guy comes around, and you can see he's picking up pollen from different plants or different flowers, and he flies to the next one, he's going to rub against that sticky stigma, and that's going to put a piece of pollen on there. Then the pollen grows down the style. The style is the basically the long neck that is associated with the female part. So and the pollen tube will have to grow down the style to get down here into the ovule. Okay, to the ovary. I'm sorry, the ovary, and inside the ovary you have the ovules, which are the egg cells. Okay, so this whole ovary is the thing that turns into fruit for us. So if you look at that, you can almost think that this looks a little bit like, I don't know, a capsicum or even a pear, or excuse me, any fruit that you will actually cut open with then the pips in the inside. Alright, so we need to know that the main leaves are called the petals, and then the green leaves that used to protect it while it was a bud, they are called the sepals. Okay, you don't have to know the perianth word, but you do need to know petal and sepal. Down here is where the nectar is produced, and it's produced in something called the nectary. Isn't that funny? Okay, the nectary. And then we look at the male part. The male is called stamen. Okay, so the stamen, it's men, that's the male part, and it's got this thing called the filament, and then the top of it, where it carries its pollen, is called the anther. Now I always think about a male deer where they have antlers. Anther sounds like a male deer. Antler, anther. So anther is where the pollen is. Okay, this helps me remember. So you know the word stigma. Stigma means that somebody has a stigma associated with them. So she doesn't have a stigma, she's stylish, but she's got a pistil. Okay, and the whole female part together is called a pistil. That's why I put this picture in for you. Okay, so again, petal is the color one. The pistil is made up of the sticky stigma, the style, the ovary, and the ovule. Down at the bottom we have the sepal. Then the stamen is where we find the anther, which is where the pollen is, and then the filament, which carries the anther at the top. Okay, so there's a very good chance they will give you a picture like this, and then they will tell you, okay, tell us what is what. And then you say, okay, number one is the stigma. Number two is the style. Number three is the anther, and number four is the filament. Number five is the petal. Okay, and the ones that we don't see in there is the whole thing. So the stamen and the pistil, and then also the ovary and the ovules. Alrighty, so we've gone through that already. Stamen is the male, stamen is an anther and the filament. Female parts, you can see, look at that plant there. You can see, interesting that this side wasn't fertilized, whereas that side was. And that's why sometimes when we, as a producing country where we produce strawberries, our strawberries frequently look a little bit wonky. It's because they weren't fertilized everywhere. So have a look next time you see a strange formed fruit. Frequently it's got to do with the fertilization. Okay, but you can see that was the inside, which is now turning into a fruit. So the pistil is the whole thing. Sticky stigma, style, ovary, and ovule. Okay, and the ovule becomes a seed when the sperm fertilizes it. The ovary simply contains the ovules, just like a human ovary. It contains the egg cells before they are released. And then the style, okay, that's the tube that carries the stigma and allows for the pollen tube to go down it. The petal is the colorful part to attract the birds. The sepal protects the young bud of a young flower. The receptacle is kind of this base that it sits on. And then obviously we have down at the bottom we have the roots. And we're going to stop there for today. So guys, thank you very much for your attention. I will put some other work on the OLE for you. So have a great day. Thank you. Bye.